Hello, everyone, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, because we know people are joining us from all over the world. My name is Pradeep Nayak, and I am at the University of Waterloo in the Faculty of Environment in Canada. And I am also a part of the Vulnerability to Viability Global Partnership for Building Strong Small-Scale Fisheries Network. So welcome all of you to the webinar today. I'm going to do some introductions. I will introduce the B2B Global Partnership, and I will provide a brief introduction to the thematic webinar series, and then I will introduce our speaker today before we start to listen to the talk. And then there would be questions and answers session at the end, where you can write your questions in the chat, and we'll read it out to the speaker. So just as an introduction to the B2B Global Partnership, which is a transdisciplinary research knowledge and action network with over 100 members from Africa, Asia, Canada, and internationally. The goal of the global partnership is to support small-scale fisheries in their transition from vulnerability to viability. And the way we understand and work on vulnerability and viability is not just to include the economic aspect of small-scale fisheries, but also to focus on the political, the cultural, ecological, and all other aspects of small-scale fisheries, as if it matters, to the people within the fishery itself. Our focus is fourfold. The first is to co-create and co-produce the knowledge that is effective in achieving this transition from vulnerability to viability. Create a repository or a database in the form of an information system, which will hold our case studies and the knowledge that can be used by all stakeholders, starting from the community to the policymakers and everybody in between. Developing transdisciplinary capacity across all of the levels pertaining to small-scale fisheries, and also, analyzing the importance of capacity development to the transition on vulnerability to viability. And the fourth focus is on the synthesis and integration of knowledge that is co-produced, so that we can inform policy action and overall governance arrangements around small-scale fisheries. The B2B Global Partnership aims to identify the diverse factors and conditions contributing to the vulnerability of small-scale fisheries, and engage collaboratively with small-scale fisher communities and other key NGO, government, and university partners to enhance small-scale fisheries viability. We are conducting transdisciplinary community-engaged research in 6 countries in Asia, which includes Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, and Thailand, and 6 countries in Africa that includes Ghana, Malawi, Nigeria, Senegal, South Africa, and Tanzania. In doing so, the B2B Global Partnership brings people and organizations together across physical, cultural, and disciplinary boundaries through a shared understanding and interest to address global change impacts on small-scale fisheries. The B2B Global thematic webinar series, for which we have gathered virtually today, is an initiative of the B2B Global Partnership to facilitate and generate high-level discussions on vulnerability and viability themes and topics within the context of small-scale fisheries. The goal is to feature academics, representatives of government and intergovernmental organizations, practitioners, and members of the civil society who have made significant contributions to the theoretical, practical, and policy aspects of small-scale fisheries, both locally and globally. B2B thematic webinar series takes place on the last Friday of every month, and it will continue to be so during the 2023 year. The series is available internationally through live streaming on YouTube. Details regarding the monthly webinar, including speakers, topics, and titles, and links to webinar platforms, is available on our website, which is www.b2bglobalpartnership.org. Today's webinar is the 6th in the series of B2B thematic webinars planned for the year 2023, and the 30th since January 2021, when it all started. And it is my privilege to introduce Dr. Sisir Pradhan, as our distinguished speaker today. Dr. Pradhan is an academic practitioner working on sustainability management issues and transdisciplinary knowledge systems pertaining to natural resources, but also including fisheries. He has a combined more than 25 years of professional experience of working with NGOs, international agencies, and governments. Sisir's academic engagements, along with professional experience in national and international development and research space and geographical areas covering the South Asia and Africa, is tremendous. Through his work, he has been instrumental in shaping development and research initiatives in the areas of value chain, natural resource management, livelihoods, marine tenure, sustainable agriculture, social protection, environmental health, climate change, and disaster management. Sisir holds a PhD in sustainability management from the University of Waterloo in Canada. He has been an active member of the Dried Fish Matters Network, and his PhD research was completed as part of his project to look at dried fish value chains. And Dried Fish is a partner organization or network of B2B. Sisir has published extensively on topics focusing on all aspects pertaining to the building of strong and viable resource-dependent communities. His recent work has focused on small-scale fisheries, well-being, and viability. Sisir is an active member and collaborator of the B2B Global Partnership in its goal to support transition of small-scale fisheries from vulnerability to viability. It is my honor to invite Dr. Sisir Pradhan to deliver today's talk for the B2B thematic webinar series, June 2023. And the talk is titled Social-Ecological System-Oriented Value Chain, a Pathway for Vulnerability to Viability Transitions. Thank you very much, Sisir, for making the time today, and over to you for the talk.
Thank you, Pradeep, for the nice introduction. As you said, I'm Sisir. I'm working in development space for about 26 years, and last year I've been graduated this year actually. I graduated from University of Waterloo in my PhD. So let me share my screen. Yeah. So, yeah, my topic today is social-ecological system. Yeah, social-ecological system-oriented value chain, a pathway to vulnerability and viability. This is part of my thesis research, PhD research in eastern coast of Bay of Bengal. So I'm grateful to people who supported in this entire endeavor, like University of Waterloo, Dried Fish Matters, B2B, then IDRC and World Fish, and many people who actually helped in supporting this research on the ground. So what is my plan is that I will talk about a little bit about the context on which I'm speaking of. So then I'll introduce this conceptual empirical outlook of social-ecological system-oriented value chain, dried fish value chain, especially in dried fish context. Then I'll try to do a quick analysis how this whole framework is a promise towards understanding B2B transitions. So looking at this whole dried fish value chain, as you all know, value chain follows a commodity of chain approaches wherein the ability to produce economic value is of immense importance. And that means revenue flows or financial orientation is quite strong in value chain. So it is actually looked that financial value transmitted in a linear vertical fashion from one node to another, and there are different value chain actually organized in if you look at the different nodes from productions to consumption, and the whole revenue flow that travels, the exchanges happens between productions to processing to marketing to wholesaling to consumption. So, and the value chain really, economic value chain talks about more of logic of profit and that revenue creation that makes the value chain viable. However, if we look at value chain, the logic of profit, price, product, and convenience are important. At the same time, if we look at fisheries systems, it doesn't really operate only on those principles. It talks about how people interact with the systems. It talks about social ecological values people have. It is talk about the intergenerational knowledge systems. It talks about the people association with the fishery systems is not only because of the motivation of profit. So value chain fails to factor such non-capital relationships of the dried fish. And especially we talk about dried fish because as a fisheries, part of fisheries, because if there is no fish, there is no dried fish. That's kind of understanding we come in. So that talks about this whole economic neoclassical oriented value chain fails to factor this kind of non-capital relationships that exist in the dried fish. So this narrow profit point perspective uh, limits the whole understanding of structure, conduct, performance of the value chain. Structure by mean the nodes, the agencies, the actors, they are involved in the value chain. Conduct talks about behavior, and performance is about how we really assess value chain is viable or not. So it's mostly looked in from financial terms, but if we look at the fisheries value chain is viable, we just cannot limit ourselves to a financial terms. We need to look at its cultural, social, political, all those aspects that involved in this whole dried fish value chain. So when we fail to understand this larger holistic picture of the value chain, it often and we give more importance to the profit and market, the investors become important, and the market players who invest in the chain becomes important. So it automatically becomes more tilted towards lower end value chain actors, and the interest and the kind of voice of the low upper end value chain actors, which are fishers, dried fish producers, they are already in the disadvantaged position. So we start my entire inquiry starts from this point to understand how differently we can think about the value chain that brings, and with from a very political ecology kind of angle, that makes these operant value chain actors the prominent actor in the chain, and their voice and power in the market gets duly recognized. So that's where the point where I start inquiring my research. So looking at the empirical context, this study is taken up in eastern coast of Bay of Bengal and in eastern coast of India and northern coast of Bay of Bengal, including Odisha and West Bengal. So you can see in the map in Odisha and about five sites, two villages and two big markets, one terminal market. So five study sites in two states. And we have taken both ecological and social characteristics to actually select these study locations. So if you can see, there are criteria like traditional norms, practices, fishing trips, social relationships. Those criteria were taken. At the same time, ecological criteria like if you see the kind of village we have selected in Orissa, that's very proximate to a national park and olive ridley breeding site. So a lot of ecologically it has more significant, and it's also estuarine ecosystem. And same is in near the Digha, West Bengal. That's also estuarine ecosystems. However, it doesn't have that kind of a character of ecological importance. Like it doesn't have a marine protected area, nor it has kind of a olive ridley kind of restrictions. So it gives a diversity to understand about this ecological and social dynamics that exist in both the places. So, giving a little more into the kind of context, West Bengal is the second and Odisha is the fourth fish producing state in India. and India is a large country and the volume is really high if you consider that. So however, the share of marine fish production is in a decline trend. Mostly it is constant, and the aquaculture sector is performing really high, really good. There are more than 300% increase in aquaculture in last 10 years in Orissa, and compared to that, the marine sector is not performing that well. So the share of marine fish production is declining in the whole fish production, and therefore the importance on this sector and the sector processes are also relatively on the back burner. So if you look at dried fish, about 16.45% of the marine fish production is going for drying, and that quantity is really big compared to amount of catch we have. There is a constant increase in fishing vessels. At the same time, there is a reduction and or constant in production. So that has a strong implications of catch per unit efforts. The catch per unit efforts is constantly on the decline. So we'll talk more on that when we'll get into this detailed data and kind of findings. If we see, look at this whole mechanized and non-mechanized sectors, non-mechanized motorized crafts is still dominant, and traditional crafts are dominant, and they make about 85% of the entire fisheries operating here. So it says the fishery is really small scale and mostly you can say artisanal in many cases. However, if you look at the production trend, even though they have 85% kind of a share in the gear or the crafts, but their share to the production is only 49%. So if we can see that whole these fisheries is facing a lot more challenges compared to mechanized fisheries sector. So the and the other big driver is about this whole fishing ban. If we see, there are multiple bans in Orissa coast. There are monsoon ban. There are also conservation bans. So there are 3 bans happening. So when I'll talk about the feedbacks, how the system feedback is operating here, I'll talk a little more on that. So looking at this is just to set the context. If we see so the share of kind of a marine fisheries is shrinking day by day. And there is a strong policy and programmatic push towards aquaculture, mariculture, case culture happening. And if you look at the share of the catch by motorized and non-motorized sector is about only 49% and 59% is going to mechanized sector, which is very about 7 to 8% kind of a share in the entire fishing crafts. So there is a large focus on candidate species like shrimp, and it can be determined from about 75% of the export revenue that generates from the shrimp. Therefore, all the policy and programmatic attention is towards this kind of fisheries. So looking at the dried fish value chain, it's a little complex in this place. If you say there are 6 critical processes that involved in dry fish from catch to markets. And there is, if on the right side, if you see the kind of a transactions that happens, the first 2 nodes, fishers and dried fish process, it's quite simple. As you go a little beyond towards market, wholesale, export, and retailers, the kind of interaction is quite dense, where there is a strong competition. At the same time, there are also strong subgroup collaborations. Therefore, it is highly complex in terms of relationship, transactions, and the kind of networks this value chain establishes. So, as I said, there is a primacy on economic logic and price relationships that is very evident here. If we and there are, if you just look at the kind of revenue flow, it says only about 10 to 20% of the entire revenue that goes to fishers. The rest are actually uh, absorbed in the whole market agents and market processes. So there, and also there is another defining feature is that there is boundaries are not very kind of between nodes are not very clear and they're fuzzy. The people who are the fishers at times, they are the processors at the times, they are also the retailers. Sometimes they are also taking the role of aggregators. So if you look at the relationship in a linear value chain relationship, it is very difficult to understand that kind of with that kind of value chain analytical framework what is happening in each nodes, because it is complex and the nodes are very fuzzy. So, and there is also strong evidence of structural adjusted vertical integration, value chain integration, where one or two actors are more having more importance. They control the value chain through influence, through kind of investment, through kind of financial means. So the value chain which is actually seen in this area is mostly structurally adjusted value chain integrations, we can see. Looking at this kind of reality, we try to look at the entire value chain little differently by drawing inspirations from three theoretical areas, which actually is quite compatible to what we are thinking within the value to B2B transitions. Here we have tried to look at value chain from dried fish value chain from a social ecological system framework, and from value chain of course, and third area where we looked in social ecological well-being, which are also very core theoretical approach within the V2B transitions framework. So drawing inspiration that we try to come up with a novel value chain framework where we try to look at value chain generally in typical value chain, commodity value chain, biophysical research, fisheries are looked at like inbound logistics function instead of it is a very core node to the value chain functions, because unless the resource becomes a commodity and it actually able to produce economic value, that is not taken in within the ambit of value chain analysis. And so that in that context, that becomes very important in the value chain as a inbound logistic functions, but they're not a critical determinant of the whole value chain decision making. So what we try to do is look at value chain resource as a critical node with a critical logic. With the important logic is that if there is no fish, there is no dried fish. So when fisheries become a critical node, then why? Because with we have seen in the value chain kind of mapping, the fisheries plays a very critical role in determining price, product quality, and those parameters which are extremely important for any value chain structure, conduct, and performance. So therefore, we thought biophysical resource has to be a critical node within the value chain. And when we look at the biophysical resource as a node, then we have seen there are multiple kind of this is very dynamic. There is a very dynamic interactions that takes place among the actors, agencies, and nodes that exist the value chain. It's not just linear financial transactions, rather it's talking about the cultural values, cultural exchanges, your historical dependencies, your kind of a geographical separation, your associations, credit flows. So those kind of things, dynamics becomes very, very different when we look at fisheries systems as a critical node into the entire. And then there are ecological as well as human kind of a feedbacks, two-way feedbacks that involves in the systems. When there are two-way feedback, the linkages are quite dynamic and different. So here the linkages are not just seen among the actors, the linkages can be seen within and among different value chain nodes in a very dynamic pattern. So then this whole resource being a critical node, that also gives a new lens to think through the structure, conduct, performance of the value chain, where the structure and conduct structure is node is this whole biophysical resource system, fisheries resource systems is becoming an important node within the value chain that changes the whole structural configuration of the value chain. At the same time, the behavior and performance lens is also redefined in the whole process. Here, that gives kind of a new lens to think through. We are not looking at price, product, and profit. Rather, value chain can be looked from different attributes, social ecological systems attributes, such as feedbacks, linkages, uncertainties, and emergencies. So this analytical framework, the SES oriented dried fish value chain analytical framework, we made a departure in actually analyzing value chain from a price product relationships kind of a approach to a systems attribute systems social ecological systems attributes, such as I said, feedback, linkages, uncertainty, and performance, and emergencies. So we have tested this novel framework in the field, in the empirical context of Bay of Bengal. We have tried to look at these four big attributes with 16 variables. So feedbacks are seen from intensification, diversification, social relations kind of variables, whereas linkages are seen from the roles, relationship, resource, and roles. Uncertainty is very critical, and we have seen in market systems generally, when we talk about uncertainty, we talk about risks, and risks are generally managed through financial apparatus, management tools, and also kind of a logistics arrangements mostly. However, there are this in uncertainty, we look at systems which cannot be controlled, and there are a lot of things which cannot be controlled. Like there are many issues coming from within, outside the space, outside the systems, outside the domain, like climate change, blue economy, blue growth. So those kind of things which are out of the control of a systems, of a value chain. So there we are looking at supply variability, demand variability, process uncertainty, policy and control kind of systems. How do they really influence the value chain, and mapping those will give a better understanding about the whole value chain operation in one particular in a product or place context. Whenever there are uncertainty, we look at uncertainty, then value chain, these whole systems goes to different levels of equilibrium. So, and it also gives new emergencies and new opportunities. So we looked at special features, place-based values, technology, and skill level. What are the different kind of emergencies coming from? Looking at the feedback, as I said, there is whole rise or increase in number of vessels. At the same time, there is a reduced production. And the same time, if you see, while there is a number of vessels are increasing in traditional sector or non-mechanized sector is 85%, the share of production is going down day by day. The mechanized sector having less kind of a crafts and gears, crafts, and but their share of production is more. So it clearly says that there is a reduced CPU and then the CPUE, and there is and people are to cope up with these systems. They are actually opting for various things. There is evidence of extractive fishing happening, and trawl nets, bull trawling, those kind of practices are becoming very common in this area. And now with the kind of expanded BOM, like peoples are new market is emerging in terms of poultry and fish feeds, fish meals. So with the aquaculture growing, with the animal husbandry sector thriving, so there is a lot of demand from that sides coming in. So this whole C-class species which were going for dried fish, most of them are now being diverted to the poultry feed kind of a plants and poultry feed and fish mills, and also trash fish is becoming very economically alluring for the big trawlers and mechanized fishers. So there are a lot of one side there are new market opening, new collaboration is happening. Market on the sea is becoming very common, where trawlers from one state are trading with the other states. At the same time, the people, these traditional small crafts, who were actually dependent on trawler owners to get the C-class fish for fish processing, they are at times denied, and therefore a lot of conflicts are coming at that level. So there is an expanded BOM also with the technology improving. You can say now there is a big push, big market for the live fish, processed fish, and this technology improving self life of the fish is increasing, so the transportation is becoming easier. So the share of dried fish, challenges at the dried fish is also becoming more and more. So and there are a lot of feedbacks coming from external drivers, you can say, with the blue growth kind of a framing, and also Orissa and West Bengal are quite uh, quite pro-industrialized kind of economies, where there are a lot of thrust to ports. For example, in Orissa, there are 13 ports coming in, and there is also a huge focus in aquaculture, as I said already. There is a focus on candidate species, and there are fishing bans coming from conservation kind of a understanding. So there are these kind of external drivers has strong bearing on the dried fish operation in the area. At the same time, the kind of climate change effects are looked in. So people said that when we inquired from the communities, they said that there are so many fishes they used to get from their own area, and they're now no more getting. So there is whole traditional separation, geographic separation, boundary separation is actually blurring. Earlier, there are mechanisms like people from the traders from West Bengal were actually sourcing Indian mackerel from Odisha, and Odisha people were sourcing anchovy from West Bengal. And those kind of relationship is changing, and if that kind of relationship changing, the kind of arrangements, trade arrangements, they had their permanent agents in their paper, their credit arrangements, their dependency, everything is changing in that sense. So whole market behavior, conduct, value chain conduct is changing in that place. So now with the kind of technology, phone, vehicle, transportation, all this is available. Now everyone is sourcing from everywhere, and there's a whole the idiosyncratic feature of any place based any particular area, their technology, their knowledge, skill, that's also getting blurred. So that leads to whole dynamism in livelihoods diversification in the space. And there are a lot of changes happening, and people are going, there are a lot of uh, migration happening in the fishing communities, both within the sector and outside the sector. Looking at the linkages, so I have said that we have looked in from three critical lanes. One is roles and responsibilities. As I said, there are fuzzy boundaries between the chain nodes. People are also growing, who are some are actually fishers assuming the role of processors assuming the role of aggregators. So those kind of fuzzy boundaries that is happening. There are mixed identity. So you just cannot separate. These are the fishers. They are the suppliers only to the value chain. These are the processors. They are there, and these are the traders. So there is identity is mixed, and now Then there is a whole dynamic transactions path has been seen. You have seen earlier that once it goes out of the processing, now it is going to different kind of a with increased VOM, it is going to different uh, 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 markets and different kind of supply chains. For example, for fish meal, for live fish, for kind of and each fish traditionally, each kind of dried fish has different kind of market chains, and that is also changing over the period of time. So there are also formal rules and informal rules that is changing the rule of the game. As I said, there is a primacy in aquaculture, frozen value-added fish, and there is also full push towards technology upgradation, and that is creating big stress on small scale and tiny fishers about their ability to cope with the systems. And dried fish being considered, there is a trade waiver, so it's a strongly informal kind of economy. So it's very difficult to have those kind of a real transparent data and kind of what is happening in that space, because the traders fear if they display everything, and then that can attract this whole GST. GST means tax regime, which they are now getting thing. And then as I can say, there are also international trades that are impacting in trade rules that are impacting the sector. So India is signatory to SAFTA, South Asian trade agreements, where there are import restrictions are actually there are whole incentives for importing small fish from other countries, Asian countries. So, and one side you can see these Indian processing, dried fish processing units, they're operating at the level of 30 to 35% efficiency when they get those fish in bulk with lower cost from other states. So they are happy to do that. And then these local fishers are local small scale fishers is facing a lot more competition from this kind of process. And that is creating new dynamics into the whole systems. As I said, conservation bans, there are three type of bans Orissa has, and that ban itself, like ban, you won't imagine the bans, this is olive ridley ban, which is 120 square kilometer, 120 kilometer of the coast of Orissa. It continues from November to June 15. So almost 7 months of the year, they are not allowed for fishing in the territorial water through motorized boats. But traditional canoes can go in, but motorized boats are banned within 10 kilometers from the coastline, and then trawlers are banned from the 20 kilometers from the coastlines. And that is another story. The time on permit to really go in detail about it, and if you are interested, my paper is there, so you can see how this fishing ban is creating multi-level kind of interactions where conflicts are becoming becoming more and more complex than thing. There are a lot of informal rules also which are there. People have been doing it, and also new rules are emerging. Now with the increasing cost of labor, the shared labor, shared kind of mechanisms coming, and people are also inviting their more of their family and friends to settle near the coast, and so that they can share labor and crafts and those things to cope up with the increasing cost and low production. So those kind of mechanisms are coming up. And the most important thing we saw, women are now venturing into the sea. Earlier, women are not going into the sea. They are mostly engaged in the production activities when after fish landing. But now women are also getting into the sea with their husband just because they cannot afford a hired labor. For since the catch is very unpredictable. There are also a lot of informal credit rules everyone knows that exist in this space. Looking at uncertainty, I'll go a little quicker. Uncertainty. This region is high vulnerability, so it experienced a lot of coastal episodic events, and this dried fish is more of like they operate on the coast. They're once this such one, and many times they are not insured. They are not very institutionalized in the sense they're not eligible for kind of uh, state support, compensation, and those kind of things. So once these episodic events happens, their whole infrastructure is lost, and coming back, bouncing back after that takes a lot more time. So people are resorting to many different kind of options during when such things happens. They go for labor work for some days, save some money, come back, and they again restart their thing. So if there are more surplus labor, some of them migrate and some of them remain and do some small activities. And in many cases, they are also not doing drying. Then in one villages, we found that people have stopped drying for about last 2 years with recurrent cyclones, and they are engaged in live fish trading at the moment, live fish catch and trading. So people are coping in very different ways. Uncertainty is hitting in a very different ways. There are also evidence of habitat shift. As I said, Indian mackerel, which was plentifully available in Orissa, no, it's no more available, and that is actually having implications in geographical separation of the market, sourcing systems, whole agent client relationships, and that is changing because of the shift in habitat, which is not very yet established, but there are evidences. People are saying that some species are not more available as it was available earlier, but in some areas they are available now more, like in West Bengal they see more Indian mackerel. The fishing days are reducing because of the climatic events, because of the fishing ban, because of many other factors. The days are reducing, and that has strong bearing on the employment, labor, and kind of a value chain processes that exist in the area. So there are also on the other side, uh, the market dynamics is changing, as I said, with the kind of BOM, with the use of same input, same material, same fish. People now can do many things. People are going for live fish market. They are going for fish pickles. They are processing. Then women credit groups are getting more organized. Producers organizations are being supported by the government. So in that sense, the dried fish economy, the fisheries sector is becoming much more complex in terms of portfolios, and therefore it has bearing on the dried fish. And as I said, there are a lot of blue economic drivers that is coming in. Ecotourism is a big push, wherein hotel industries are taking like ocean graving, ocean space graving is very kind of a prominent in this space. Ports are coming, industrial pollution is really high in some places, and that is disenfranchising many people along with the natural factors. So all these causing whole supply, demand, process, and policy level of uncertainty. And this uncertainty system actually is not static. It is getting reconfigured, as I said, again and again with the social ecological kind of framing. As I said, there is altered fishing practices, like women have started going to sea. There are now much more collaboration of shared fishing crafts, shared labor. So that's kind of arrangements are coming up. There are subgroup collaborations are coming now. There is a bigger market in the sea. Trawler owners are actually coming together. So like Odisha, Odisha state trawlers are selling small trash fish to the Andhra sellers, because Andhra is a South India state where there are a lot more fish processing units. This poultry fish mill units are there. So the market, the collaboration is happening at that space. So fish landing the fish for dried fish landing is coming lower and lower at the land at the local level. So there is a group conflict happening at that level. So as I already explained about the geographic separation is happening, a new configuration is coming up in the sense of sourcing, in terms of marketing. Market specialization is also becoming, some are becoming specialized. Like we studied one Sunakala market where there are 30 traders who are trading dried fish. Now only 7 are doing dried fish, but about 13 are doing fish meal, about 6 are doing live fish, frozen fish kind of a trade. So with the diversion, with the market opening, and there are also specialization is happening at that level. So the same people getting into different kind of thing. Place-based values also, there are certain changes happening. There is a social capital. Um, uh, like I said, one village where we are working, there the migrant Bengalis, Bangladeshis, they came to this place during the Bangladesh war, and before that, now even after that, they are inviting with the low, in spite of low catch, they are inviting their uh, peers from their area, so that they can have more people and more political and social voices as well as the labor. So they can actually compete with the local Oriya fishers at that level. At the one hand, have more political bargaining power, and at the same time, they can have the labor uh, uh, force for their things. So, and women with a greater value chain roles now, with the kind of government is actually there is a policy a push towards women collectives. It's happening, and technology side also there are certain changes happening. So with the kind of this kind of analysis, we try to map the value is not just mere a financial value. Rather, here value can be seen from a social ecological well-being framework, wherein material, subjective, relational, ecological values are cared for by the local communities. So the detailed analysis is available in my study, and anyone interested, they can actually read my paper, and that I'll give a link to that. So looking at the kind of departure, there is a clear departure from the whole conventional value chain analysis and species-oriented dried fish value chain analysis. You can see at a structural level, biophysical resource is external, but here biophysical resource is a critical node. In typical economic value chain, we talk about linear feedback. Here we talk about non-linear feedback, interactions across different level and scale, as I already explained. Upstream actors are passive suppliers, like in what you saw in the value chain. They are only suppliers. They have little importance, but when there is a resource gets importance, the fishers becomes very active collaborators because they work with the resource and they understand the resource more. On the behavioral plan, content plan, there is a market logic, there are weak connections, value chain efficiency is determined to aggregate value chain creation across the node. It's more talks about aggregate value creation. There is a whole managerial changes are looked from a profit centric, from BOM kind of a perspective in the conventional value chain. However, in social ecological systems value chain, it looks at a systems logic. There is a greater consideration for resource human connections, as I said, there is a whole analysis of the material relation, subjective and ecological well-being. Bias towards upstream actors. Performance wise, if I say value is beyond revenue gain, as I said many times. The value is seen as social capital, power, influence, image, belongingness, cultural processes, intergenerational skills. Those are actually given higher importance, and that is very critical in determining the value chain structure, conduct, performances in case of proprietary systems. So, looking at how does this whole analysis fits into B2B transitions, as we say B2B transitions, we need to look at grounded place-based decision challenges in a context, and this kind of analytical framework to the value chain is really more suitable to look at place-based issues and challenges, and it also respects the whole multidisciplinary experiences of the people. It is not that generally in economics terms we say when there is low catch there will be many people who will go away from the systems, but here in spite of the low patch people are actually inviting their own people again to cope up with the system. So things are very different. The people relate to the systems, and people are not only work in the fisheries for and even if there is a migration, we have seen about 60% people are migrating within the sector. They are going to they are doing traditional they are doing motorized fishing. Now they are actually getting employment in mechanized boats and kind of things. So there is a whole transdisciplinary pathways to engage with particular issue. So generally value chain is product, price, profit kind of relationship, and also looking at inbound logistics. But here with the it is really to understand how things are operating with the people whom value chain matters, with the upstream actors and market actors, and how they think, how they relate, and how the things are changing. So in that sense, it is this approach is more suitable towards understanding this viability to this whole vulnerability to viability transitions. This whole B2B has a foundation on political ecology. So here we are talking of the power in the market of the poor. So that brings in a strong political ecology lens to analyze and understand the market behavior and market processes in the fish chain. Likewise, as I can say, safely conclude, is this value chain analysis is a tool towards a just market systems, and it is better suited to understand vulnerability to viability transitions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks
Hello.
very much, Sisir. That was wonderfully, articulated based on your research, and the link to the B2B, transitions is, it's a nice perspective, that links with the value chain perspective that you have worked on. So we will see, if we have questions from the audience. I'm just requesting all the audience that are watching the talk on YouTube to write their questions in the chat section so that we can respond to that, or Cecil can respond to that. But in the meantime, if you the value chain has you're taking a social ecological systems perspective of the value chain here. You have 4 parameters of social ecological systems that you use, uncertainty, feedback, and emergence, being 3 of them. Just for the sake of understanding, are there other social ecological system elements that could be used or applied in understanding the value chain itself, or in understanding value chain, that goes beyond the economic understanding of value chains itself? Are there missing elements of social ecological systems?
Yes, that's a wonderful question. One is that what I tried is like look at this whole value chain structure, conduct, performance, how it is configured. And I saw there are feedbacks between actors that is actually being analyzed when we go for a value chain analysis, though it is analyzed on a price product relationship kind of a profit relationship kind of framework, but there are feedbacks that is being understood. Relationship was also critical, and that was look at the relationship linkages with the different actors in the value chain, actors in terms of credit actors, finance actors, policy actors, your whole market actors and producers, kind of a linkages that is really analyzed in the value chain. And uncertainty, in the sense they looked at from a very risk management kind of strategies in the value chain. And about they are not looking at emergencies, but they look at more on value chain diversification or value chain kind of a reconfiguration kind of BOM kind of a structure. So I thought these are whole matching attributes that can actually provide kind of a common ground to understand both the theoretical framework. One is social ecological systems and other one is the value chain. So these are the four. But I think there are others, like when I am now working on climate change and tenure, I see subsystems and subsystems level analysis in the from social ecological systems framework holds highly important kind of a framing to understand the value chain governance and value chain conduct kind of a process. So definitely there is scope to think through and look at if other attributes of the social ecological systems applied in analyzing the value chain, will it give much robust kind of understanding. So that requires further exploration, definitely.
Yeah, and related to that, one of the lessons that is evident from your discussion of the social ecological system perspective of value chains and linking with V2V is that like value chain has nodes. And so I'm just thinking, can a transition process have nodes, can have nodes, learning from value chain, theory itself. If so, then what are those nodes and how might they look like in a transition from vulnerability to viability process? Are those nodes going to be helpful because it's like the scale and the levels, and therefore the nodes in a transition could be very helpful points to take a pause and understand the process well and go from there. So any thoughts on that would be would be good. Yeah,
I think it is very interesting. Now I'm working on a program called climate change and tenure. In that, what some of the partners are looking at, they're talking of making the fishers climate ready from uncertainty kind of a framing. So what they're saying, can market and fiscal instruments be effective to address this uncertainty? So they are talking of blue carbon bonds. They are talking of like TNC is a big way talking of blue carbon bonds, where you can actually work on debt swapping kind of a larger financial tools to incentivize conservation and fisheries on the ground. Many are talking of supply chain kind of incentives, greening supply chains, so that eco-leveling and those kind of issues will hold significance in management and making the fisheries viable. So, and sometimes that is also working against, like for example, blue carbon bonds, that is anyway incentivizing MPAs, marine protected areas, and that is displacing the fishers at another level. One side, it is conserving the blue carbon systems, other side, there is displacement is happening. So these are very interesting frameworks coming up within the supply chain and value chain, and this value to this node level kind of a understanding and labels within the value chain, and each level how these things are operating and how this is making the whole ecological and sociological social feedbacks and relationships in the systems. So that is very interesting to analyze and understand, and that gives immense impetus to really look at this V2B lens into the value chain kind of a framing and understand the dynamics in that. So I see a large potential now, large area with this kind of larger push towards this climate change, small scale fisheries, making this whole optimizing the fishers, blue carbon fisheries, blue carbon kind of interactions. It is becoming all the more important to understand these dynamics. I think what you are saying, scale, level, subsystems, and these nodes becomes all the more critical in analyzing value chain as well as the value chain uh, interventions at different level uh, with a very systems perspective. That will
Yes.
really help.
Yeah, and in that sense, both become a, a tool to analyze each other. So a
Yeah.
B2B perspective on value chain and a value chain perspective on B2B.
B2B.
I have a question from Derek Armitage, and Derek is writing, Sisir, thanks for such a comprehensive overview and assessment of the dried fish value chain. There are so many dimensions related to the vulnerability and viability of SSF in this context. Can you elaborate a bit more on maybe one or two policy and governance levers to help address the situation? For example, at some scales, is a more co-management approach possible?
Yeah. Um, Thanks, Derek, for as always for this thought-provoking question. I think I have the I have already mentioned a tool. If you look at a value chain side, there are a lot of pulses coming from international trade agreements. So as I said, there is SAFTA agreements happening in this space where these all South Asian countries who are coming under um, Commonwealth, there's 5-6 countries they coming under this agreements: Vietnam, Thailand, India, Bangladesh. Uh, what is that done is that for intercountry kind of imports, there are tax holidays. So now when there is a tax holidays coming in, so people are trying to import lot of whoever the capital access to large capital, they are taking the advantage of the space. So it is getting more and more capital intensive rather than very place based, situational, ecological knowledge intensive. So that is changing the whole social ecological dynamics in the sea space. That one side, that is blurring the geographical boundaries. At the same time, that is also making the inter-country kind of a value chain framework and actors and things pushing towards more of, rather than resource oriented, more on capital oriented. So that's kind of a things is coming up. And the other side, I can cite an example from like blue bonds, what I said. And now there are a lot of investment is happening in blue bonds, and India has also come up with a climate change registry on carbon trading. In that, under the NDC, there is a big push towards more and more marine protected areas. So 62 countries, in fact, in their indices, they have talked about marine protected areas. So that is actually creating, and they're saying 20% of the area, 10 to 20% of the sea space will be conserved. And in that sense, fishing would be restricted in those areas. and that will have very strong bearing on the people who are depending on dried fish kind of context, which is a very place-based, local, and poorest of the poor does all this kind of a business. They are not very big people, big capital investment. What would happen now? There would be a lot of aggregation will happen with the capitalist coming into the space, because sourcing will become very diverse and very I think capital intensive. Like they will source more of trash fish from the trawlers and go for drying, rather than the small fishers drying, becoming a fish dryer and selling it in the market. So that kind of consolidation is also happening with this kind of policies. These are some negative aspects. There are also a lot of positives happening with the kind of in India there is a policy coming up supporting farmers producers organizations quite a lot, where women are accessing credit without interest, and that kind of a framework bringing in more local investments required to become a equal market player who have been suffering from credit gaps and those kind of things. So there are so many policy instruments that is coming on, and that is changing the whole governance dynamics of the value chain and the fishery systems in this place. So I can talk about a few more, but yeah, for this I can talk all these things about this.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for that answer. Um, may, uh, maybe I'll ask one more and then we'll bring it to an end. So you mentioned about a few key drivers. Blue economy, blue growth being some of the prominent drivers impacting not only the dried fish sector and the value chain, but also how B2B might look like, or vulnerability to viability transitions might look like in numerous small-scale fisheries context itself. Sisir, can you elaborate a little bit more on these new drivers and what kind of impact they may have on our understanding of the value chain? Because they are going to, impact the value chain in a drastic way. So what do you see in your analysis are some of the key impacts of these new drivers such as blue economy, and how that might shape the value chains that are existing, even if with an understanding of the social ecological system perspective of the value chain itself. Because my understanding is it's going to bring in more soft issues like fairness, questions about justice, questions about intricate power relationships, and all of those things are going to be very heavily dominating the value chain scene with these new drivers. So what are some of the experiences from the Bay of Bengal and in your research?
One thing I said, the capital is playing bigger role at the moment, with the kind of low cash per unit and bigger market opening up in the sea. The capital is the game changer, is happening. That is with the thing. But with the blue economy and blue growth, there are few frontiers are opening at the moment. If you see here, if you look at the fisheries in, you all understand it much better. It is not only that space where fishing is done. It is about the beach where fish operations happens, drying happens. These boats are actually kept. Then the blue carbon systems, which you can say the wetlands, like Chilica kind of wetlands, and then mangroves, that creates kind of an enabling environment for these small scale fishes, have very viable breeding grounds to go to small areas and day trips, catch and come back and do this kind of drying, and that makes the systems more equal and equitable. But when these systems are getting tenuous because of various factors, because of hotels coming in the beaches are encroached, ports are coming in, the whole space for people operating on the shore is reducing. A lot of industries and waste releases happening in the sea. So in Paradeep, especially, people are complained about the pollutions, and because of the pollutions, the fish catch is reducing. So, and then the other things, other big forces is coming in the name of green investment. These beaches are now diverted to solar parks, and you will be you'll be surprised to know that earlier we have whole fiscal measures were to support the decentralized solar processing plants, like small ones. Now government giving tax holidays to large entities to have more carbon sequestration projects by big players. So in that sense, that is actually disenfranchising and dispossessing many of the people who have been doing those kind of thing in a lower and smaller scale. So these brings in new dynamics in terms of vulnerability and viability. In that sense, people are coming up with new configurations altogether. So there are sometimes there are protests, but there are sometimes also there is a push towards the tenure kind of thinking, where earlier it was missing. It is a more of access. Now people are talking, no, we need a strong tenure to really retaliate to this kind of process in future. So that gives more sense of ownership, more sense of more urge towards having greater community based systems rather than individual system at some times. At the same times, these forces are also disintegrating society with power and money. So both the processes are happening at the time. It's a huge transitions that is setting in this area, I can say. So I think that needs to be understood in the context of a special place-based context about their policies, programs, people, how they are coping with, how they are managing. Sea level rise is creating another problems. Now there are 30 villages in Tamil Nadu has been relocated, 6 in Orissa has been relocated. So, and when they are relocated 20 kilometers away from their own space, but they are not allowed into the sea, as they can get into the sea very well. They are only 6 kilometers away from the sea. So there are policy dynamics coming into that. So there are many changes happening, and that would require kind of a bigger understanding and analysis to come up with appropriate mechanisms.
Yeah, I think your analysis is really correct. Because there is need to be investment in understanding these new complexities that are emerging. Therefore, there could be response mechanisms that could be designed across all levels itself. But at the same time, there is one fine line that goes into the domain of policy, governance and legal systems, because you're moving from rights and access to tenure, which is more challenging in terms of legal policy frameworks. So new areas needs to be explored, or forgotten areas of work needs to be brought into the forefront to address these new challenges, such as blue economy, and then blue growth and all of that. So I think we are at time now. But this talk is going to be available on YouTube, so people always watch it afterwards and then write comments. So this discussion continues into the future. But thank you very much, Sisir, for bringing a new topic and bringing new perspectives to the understanding of vulnerability, viability, transitions, and adding value chain as a novel area. And in terms of understanding the transition itself. So we'll continue this discussion for the audience. So again, we'll have another webinar talk next month on the last Friday, and we'll announce that in a few days from now. You can have the information on our website, but we'll also tweet it out for you. So looking forward to seeing you, most of you, next month again, and with my hearty thanks to everybody for this discussion and for participation in the webinar. Thank you once again, Sisir. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for present hearing. Thank you.